Some of the biggest gamblers in America wouldn't know the difference between a roulette table and spin the bottle, but they're gamblers nevertheless. I'll be right back. Not too long ago, I was a guest speaker in Las Vegas to a national agriculture group. Some of the regular patrons of Las Vegas must have thought the farm visitors were a little out of place. But I have news for them. A farmer of any kind is in a business that makes a crap table or roulette wheel look like a guaranteed annual income. Year in and year out, the farmer bets his whole roll against weather, insects, plant and animal diseases, and a supply and demand system in which he's flying blind. He has no way of knowing whether everyone else is raising the same crop he decided to plant or if he'll have the market to himself. It can rain too early or too late, or too much or too little, and any one of these can make him a loser. Some years back, a Secretary of Agriculture was getting around the country, hearing at first hand the farmers' views. And one of them was giving him a rough time with his complaints. The secretary sneaked a hasty look at his briefing papers and said, "Well, now, wait a minute. You didn't have it all that bad last year. You got 29 inches of rain." The farmer says, "Yeah, I remember the night it happened." A couple of years back, when beef prices shot up, the cattle growers took a lot of abuse they didn't deserve. For one thing, there'd been virtually no increase in beef prices at the grower level for more than a decade. There had been a sizable hike in the price of feed, the grain that puts on that finishing growth in the feedlot. And it takes about 4.5 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of meat. Arithmetic is a very exact science, and when the grain price per pound is higher than beef per pound, how do you come out in that 4.5 to 1 ratio of feed to meat? And just to top things off, in that year of high-priced meat, we had winter storms on the western plains that killed thousands of animals. In one storm alone, the toll was $100 million worth. That was also the year the workers in the packing houses struck for higher pay. The housewife was angry about the high price of meat, but was she angry at the right people? March 24th has been named Agriculture Day in recognition not only of the farmer's responsibilities, but of what agriculture means to all of us. It's true that almost everything starts on a farm. The things we eat and wear, but also chemicals, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, soap, and even ink. Less than 5% of our people provide for 95% and have enough left over to export to other countries. You've probably read about the disappearing family farm replaced by the huge corporation farm. Yet less than 0.1% of our 2.9 million farms are corporate. In the last few decades, the American farmer has led America and the world in a technological revolution. His increase in productivity is a miracle of the 20th century. In just the last 10 years, his production has gone up 20%, while acreage farmed has gone down 6%. The harvest from 1 out of every 4 acres is exported. Without that, our balance of trade would be in a sorry state. One farmer grows food and fiber for 51 of his fellow citizens, and 4 out of 10 non-farm jobs are dependent on agriculture. Maybe on March 24th, we should all decide, at least for the day, not to blame the farmer for the high price of food. This is Ronald Reagan. Thanks for listening. It may surprise you to learn that there's a lot more to a cow than meets the eye or gets on the dinner table. I'll be right back. Now, I'm sure we all know that a beef animal isn't all steak. It has a variety of cuts, some more tasty and desirable than others, but when I say a steer is not all steak, I have something else in mind. Actually, that line is the title of an educational display by some young people in the 4-H club in Arizona. Perhaps you aren't aware of that growing attempt to shame us into not eating beef on the grounds that we're feeding several pounds of grain to cattle for each pound of beef we get back. Now, the argument goes that grain could be used to feed the worldwide famine victims. Well, the exhibit sponsored by these farm youngsters over in Arizona can be summed up in the words of a man who deals in meat. He says, there are 4 meat quarters in a beef animal. The 5th quarter is the byproduct. In a lot of ways, that 5th quarter has done more than the other 4 to enrich and even to lengthen our lives. Before we take too seriously those sincere but ill-informed people who see cattle as taking food from the hungry, let's take a look at that 5th quarter we don't see in the meat market. Without it, your tires might blow up in 1.5 miles. One tire company alone uses about 20 million pounds of stearic acid a year. Stearic acid, a byproduct of the beef animal, is what keeps your tires cool. During last summer's beef shortage, this company had to cut back on production of tires. Here are some other things you won't see on a steakhouse menu. Products from the bones, horns, and hoofs. Glue, gelatin, including the edible kind used in ice cream, case-hardening steel, refining sugar, processed bone meal used as animal feed and fertilizer to grow more grain for the hungry. That's only the beginning. There's neat's foot oil, plaster retarder, foaming fire extinguisher, paper boxes, sizing, wallpaper, sandpaper, and emery cloth. Would you believe cosmetics, camera film, Band-Aids, spray-on adhesives, vitamins, violin strings, crochet hooks, combs, and toothbrush handles? In the field of pharmaceuticals, we truly get into the life-saving field with heparin, which keeps the blood from coagulating during an operation. It's also used in preventing blood clots. There are enzymes used to aid babies' digestion. Epinephrine for asthma and allergies. Adrenal cortex, used in treating Addison's disease and to overcome shock. The list of really exotic medicines is too long for this time slot. But just as an example, we've known about diabetes since the 15th century. It took 400 years to find insulin, and we found it in the pancreas of cattle. Today, chemists feel they've only scratched the surface in developing useful things other than food from meat animals. As for that grain we're wasting, it is feed grain, not eaten by humans, and cattle only get that for about 100 days. Beef and dairy cattle provide 2/3 of our protein, and most of that comes from converting grass and brush on 40% of our land that would otherwise be waste because it couldn't be converted to raising crops. In the meantime, our farmers are exporting 75% of our wheat and 57% of our rice to that hungry world. Let's pat Bossy on the back with gratitude. This is Ronald Reagan. Thanks for listening.